dates and interviews. The only way is the right way, I might say. Nobody doing it better, y'all some lightweights. Malik Wright, up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles. Got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick back, relax, the TWSN.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Sit Down Morning Show with Malik Wright. I'm your host, Malik Wright. We got Daniels on the ones and twos. I'll be joined with Parker Blake today. I'll be joined with Michael Hara to talk a little bit fantasy football. But before we jump into all that, do us a favor. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. As you could see, based on my shirt, based on, the way the table is set up, it's a very, very important week for Alabama, for the Crimson Tide. And, I'm pretty pumped up for us to smash Georgia in the mouth early on this season, make a name and let people know that we are a threat this year and that we are planning to go to the Natty. So I'm looking forward to it. And so it wouldn't be a sit down with Malik Wright morning show if I didn't start off by saying Roll Tide. That being said, let's jump right into the conversation. Daniel, Derrick Rose announced his retirement this morning. And listen, while Derrick Rose didn't have an elite career throughout, he probably had one of the greatest, I would say, seasons that we've ever seen. For a guy like Derrick Rose to help change the landscape of basketball in Chicago, especially, that's very difficult to do, right? Chicago Bulls had a lot of success under Michael Jordan, and that whole team there. And for Derrick Rose to come in there and create his own path, create his own legacy that's withstood the test of time. I don't know how many times I'm playing basketball with friends and they're like, D Rose. And it's like, man, like that's crazy when you actually think about it. A guy that really had a prime or truly one elite year. He was a very good player, but he dealt with injuries and that have hampered his career throughout. It brings up an interesting conversation, Daniel. Is Derrick Rose a Hall of Famer? So, Daniel, I know you're a D Rose guy. I know you like Derrick Rose to a degree. Let's hear you. Let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I like him. I don't necessarily love him. I think that, and when we have the Hall of Fame discussion, it is really a pick your poison type of battle. I think, and this is my opinion for the Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame is something that is something and someone that people are going to remember, and something that stands out within NBA history, and something that is iconic. Isn't necessarily the players, and this is my belief of, hey, this guy played 18 years but was a starter and had his top 15, top 20 total points, but he was never a top 5 player at his position. He was never a top 3 player at his position. I like to look at people that
oh my God. What? Gary Jellison is coming out hot this morning.
Crazy.
Gary Jellison is coming out hot this morning. Gary, I appreciate you, man. You said blink twice.
That's crazy.
No, but
I promise I ain't doing none of that, Gary.
I told you that.
ain't doing none of that. Listen, geez, I lost my train of thought. Derrick Rose. I think Derrick Rose does deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, and he might not get there because of some of the criteria, based off longevity, based off of total career stats. But at the end of the day, like you said, his overall, what he did, especially in the MVP season, just how iconic he is, he changed. He brought back the city of Chicago for basketball. He brought life back to them, the Joakim Noah era, right? All those guys that, it was the rough and tough era. And I think that his prime, those 2 to 3 years, that MVP year, deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. And like I said, he's one of the guys that people are going to remember. This generation is going to remember him. So if some of these other players, especially you go look at a guy like Rajon Rondo, who's in, Hall of Fame discussion for, and listen, I'm a Celtics fan. I'm a huge fan of Rajon Rondo, but at the end of the day, Derrick Rose changed the game. Derrick Rose was a superstar. Derrick Rose was the guy in the NBA. So that's my criteria. And I think for as much injuries as he dealt with, I think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame because of just how iconic, and because the dude he took over the league for those 2 to 3 years.
So Derrick Rose is a Hall of Famer in your opinion. I don't know what everyone else would agree, but I feel like he's going to get in based on that MVP season that he did have. I feel like he has to get in. I feel like it's like, I feel like you just can't. There are some people that say that Derrick Rose MVP season was probably the best player we've seen.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, for me, I'm excited to see what his next chapter is after leaving the NBA. I wanted to say it was awesome watching him play the game of basketball. Hell of a career to Derrick Rose. Hope everything works out for him. Happy to see that he doesn't have to go to the grind anymore. He made it, right? He made it out of his neck of the woods. He was able to make something of himself, and he made a legacy in the NBA. And I think that's very, very important to say, because I feel like not a lot of people can say that. So hats off to Derrick Rose. Awesome. Let's move on over to some of the NFL talk. And one of the NFL talks I want to talk about is, where do the Jaguars go from here? The Jaguars are 0-3. It's bad. It's bad right now for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And they feel like they have no hope. There's a difference between being 0-3 and like being lifeless almost. They look lifeless. They look bad. So I kind of want to jump into the discussion, but I'm not going to jump into this discussion without bringing our guy, Parker Blake, in on the conversation. My guy, Parker, what's going on, man?
How's it going, fellas? Just living the dream, man. Here to talk some ball, baby.
Yeah, man. I'm living the dream too, man. I love waking up doing these morning shows, and I love obviously talking ball with you, brother. Let's talk about it, man. Am I crazy to think that the Jacksonville Jaguars are, guess me start by saying this. Not all 0-3s are created equal. There is 0-3 losing tight games. There's 0-3 like the Bengals, where you've seen them climb out of it. You've seen them do it before. And then there's 0-3s with with the Jacksonville Jaguars, where they look absolutely lifeless. I mean, they got punched in the mouth, kicked in the mouth, spit on, thrown into the fire, everything we could think of when it comes to the everything that could have gone bad for the Jaguars has gone bad for the Jaguars, and there's no end in sight. I want to hear what your thoughts are on the Jacksonville Jaguars. I want to hear what your thoughts are on if this team can bounce back, and do you see them as dead in the water as much as I see them?
Well, yeah, and I think it's a great place to start, right? Where there are multiple different 0-3 situations to be in, like you brought up. Where, I mean, like, you got the Bengals, who, again, you're not expected to be here, but you found your way here. But you've played great games against great teams already early on this year, and you got 0-3 teams like the Titans, where they might not necessarily feel dead in the water, but at least it's still fun to watch. Yeah. I mean, they still have life, and I think they're a team that you still have to be worried about as far as, are they going to pop off a big play? Because they still have that potential. They're still trying to fight for games, and they're not like out of games. But this Jacksonville Jaguars team, man, this feels like they're just not in it anymore, and it's still September. Like, that's where I think, the worry really creeps in. I was, notoriously low on Trevor Lawrence coming out, so this is more vindication for me at this point, because I feel like he's, like we've talked about previously, he might not be the reason for the failure, but he's definitely not helping them succeed right now. And again, I think, like we talked about either last week or the week before, what this Jaguars team has to keep their eye on is this culture, and just kind of keep a pulse on that locker room, because it does feel like, again, though we're only in September, if they lose that locker room early, they could be on a really, really slippery slope for the rest of the season, and they could really spiral into a bad position. So I think they have potential, but I think, it's not looking great right now.
So I've got two things for you on this Jaguars topic. One, let's talk about it. Let's talk about Trevor Lawrence, right? And you discussed, I think we were on the same page, and I think, me and Malik, this one, I first met Malik, we did conversation on Trevor Lawrence versus Joe Burrow. I actually think that was one of our first podcasts that we ever did, and we had the same discussion. So, Parker, let's have this discussion, right? And I think these are always fascinating ones to have. What did people miss about Trevor Lawrence? And we're not writing him off saying, he's done for, but let's discuss the difference between where he was, the generational prospect, versus where he is now. What did people miss? And I think it's important. What did you see and versus where he's at now?
Yeah, no, I just saw him. I think the biggest thing in my evaluation of Lawrence was, he never really had to go through the intense, reads, full field reads, or even half field reads that these NFL guys have to do on a regular basis. They both made that offense very easy for Trevor. I've had that same issue with multiple quarterbacks coming out of that program, or just across college football. I think that was really, Trevor Lawrence is one of these first quarterbacks that came in and had a relatively easy offense to run in college. And I think, we've seen people succeed with that in the NFL. You have the Shanahans. I mean, you can look at what guys like Sam Darnold or guys like Malik Willis are doing right now in the NFL. Like, you're able to still do that, but I didn't love his ability to transition into the league because, again, his job was relatively easy. He wasn't necessarily a game manager at Clemson, but he wasn't, making the high level NFL reads. Not that you ever really knew that he couldn't, but he didn't have the experience doing it. So I expected him to get off to a rocky start, and I really worried about his ceiling coming out. I know he had a lot of great film come out of high school. He was a highly touted prospect. He kind of had hype for like 8 years before he was even in the NFL. But I think at the end of the day, that's what it was for me. It wasn't an arm talent thing. It wasn't necessarily a decision-making thing, but he was never really tested at the college level.
And let's be honest, the dude won a national championship, and then even the next year, he didn't look amazing in college. I think there were a couple of games early on in the season, I remember, where it was like, I forgot what school it was, but he threw like two to three interceptions in one of those games, and he's
Syracuse. Was it Syracuse?
I don't. It might have been.
He had a couple of games. He had a couple of games where it was like
a couple bad ones.
Yeah,
and I feel like that's kind of it was the conversation with Trevor. Hey, he won the national championship, and then since we put him on the pedestal, we can't bring him down. He can't go below number one. So I think, and that's, even when you saw first when he headed into the NFL, you go look at, I think it was 2 years ago, the London game against the Broncos, had 2 terrible interceptions. And that's been the constant reoccurring theme. He has an amazing arm talent. He can make all the throws, but it's the down-to-down consistency. So my next question real quick, Parker, is it a Doug Peterson thing or is it Trevor Lawrence? Where do you think that they go? Because obviously they just signed him to a massive 5-year extension. Is Doug Peterson on the hot seat, or do you think that they just continue to ride this out?
I think it's one of those situations where, I think Doug Peterson can do a lot of great things. And I don't want to write off a guy who's had success with lesser talent. He's had great success with lesser talent, honestly. And you have to wonder, again, maybe it could be neither of them. It could just be the team quitting around them. It could be the team struggling to get through adversity, where maybe, is Peterson just more of this X's and O's coach? He's not a guy that's going to get in there and really get the guys going. And Trevor has lost confidence in himself, so he's not going to get the team going. And so you just don't have that energy come in week to week. And now you're seeing failure, so it's going to start falling off. But I think out of the two options, I'd have to go with Lawrence, because I don't think Lawrence is a guy that's going to elevate the guys around him. I don't think he's ever been that guy. I don't think he's going to ever be that guy. And I think, especially when you have, rougher patches throughout your season, you need a guy that can elevate you. And I think Trevor's just realizing at this point that maybe the game's beyond him. And I think once your quarterback loses that confidence, it's a rocky road and a slippery slope. So I think you got to find a guy. And I definitely don't think Mac Jones is the answer, especially if you're looking for a culture guy. So they're kind of in a rocky boat right now. So it's going to be interesting to follow and see if they can dig themselves out of this rut, or if we're looking at a top 3 pick next year for these Jaguars.
So here's what I would say, and I'm happy that we're having this discussion. When you tell a guy, right, that he is everything, when you tell a guy that he is great, when you tell a guy that, he's going to be the next great quarterback coming into the NFL, and that's all he hears throughout his college career, it creates a level of complacency, I believe, because they believe that the level that they're playing at right now is acceptable, and they can carry that same level over into the NFL. So it's funny. I feel like lately we've been talking about like the blessing and the curse. The blessing was Trevor Lawrence won a national championship early on his career. The curse that came with that is, I think it made him think that he had arrived. He was everything that he needed to be without the ability to really improve. Because if you ask me, I don't think Trevor Lawrence actually improved after that. I think, if anything, he went downhill. We saw him get outplayed on numerous occasions. And, it's very interesting for me to hear how Parker evaluates quarterbacks, how Daniel evaluates quarterbacks, and then how I evaluate quarterbacks. There's one criteria I look for, and that is, what did you face? Not who have you faced, but what did you face? And when I say that, I mean, what adversity did you face? What adversity did you face that is going to allow you to succeed in the NFL? Because let's face it, if you're being drafted first overall, top 5, you're ideally probably going to an organization that hasn't had a lot of winning. You're going to go through rough patches. You have to have the capabilities to withstand rough times, you have to have the ability to uplift the talent that is around you. And for me, I remember when Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow went at it in college, and they said this was the first time Trevor Lawrence had lost in his college football career. To me, that's a red flag. Matter of fact, I think they said that was the first time he lost.
Yeah, since high school.
I think that in the national championship, if that's the first time you lose, it is a humbling experience for you a little bit. And I think a lot of people look at that as, well, he's so great. He's going to bring that winning mentality, that winning culture to our program. But it's like, nah, like I want to see a quarterback get it out the mud. I want to see a quarterback struggle. I want to see a quarterback rise from the ashes. Because guess what? For me, that's going to be the true test of your character at the quarterback position, because the NFL is not easy. You're not going to go undefeated in the NFL. You're not going to just break these teams down game after game, week after week. You're going to have to go to the grind. You're going to struggle at points in time. So while we praise Trevor Lawrence so much, and trust me, there was a lot of praise going on with Trevor Lawrence, I think that allowed a feeling of complacency to come over him. You also look at the receivers he was throwing to in college. Guys like Justin Ross, guys like T. Higgins, right? Those Clemson defensive lines were no joke either. I think that guy, unfortunately, has become a victim of media bias. This is a guy that came in with all this pressure, all this hype. And I don't feel like anyone asked him the same tough questions that a Bryce Young got. The same tough questions, hell, that a CJ Stroud got. And those are real questions that need to be asked. Now, I'm not saying Trevor Lawrence can't be a franchise quarterback in the National Football League, because I think he can. Let me just start by saying that. I've seen enough from Trevor Lawrence in the NFL to believe it's correctable, but not with goddamn Press Taylor as your offensive coordinator. That doesn't help either. You have to also ask yourself, why did Super Bowl winning head coach Doug Peterson get fired from a job after winning the Super Bowl 2 years prior? Things that make you go, Situations matter. You came in with a coach in Urban Meyer who, let's face it, didn't know what the hell he was doing. With a coach in Urban Meyer that didn't understand what it meant to be a pro. Situations matter. Let me say this to the Khan family. Let me say this to Jaguars faithful. I'm sorry, Duval. Let me say this. You better hope this organization understands that they need to, in the words of a certain someone, be unburdened by what has been. Sorry, I could not say that. I'm sorry, Daniel. They have to. They have to. And what they have to do is they have to move on from Doug Peterson this offseason. They have to hire an offensive-minded coach that is probably going to get the absolute most out of Trevor Lawrence. I don't mean an Urban Meyer. I don't mean a Doug Peterson. Somebody that can actually grow with this quarterback and rebuild his confidence. Because right now, I don't think Dougie P's doing it. And that's the part that sucks. That's the part that sucks. Because again, I feel like Trevor Lawrence is getting a bad rap. But again, I always have to analyze the situation around him. That's just my thoughts. So at the end of the day, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with the Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll see what happens with Trevor Lawrence. We'll see what happens with the way the rest of their season unfolds. But they have enough talent over in Jacksonville to win. They do. Yeah. And a division that I believe, as good as the Texans are, I still feel like that this division is still up for grabs in a lot of ways. I don't think the Texans are some juggernaut so far. I think they're good, but I don't think they're some juggernaut. Somebody said the Taylor boys are going to put a hit out on Malik. Well, that, they could do that if they want to. But at the end of the day, what I'll say is it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. I believe that, Trevor Lawrence, I believe that Joe Burrow are both being hampered by inept coaching on the offensive side of the ball. I've always felt that way. And a nice little performance against the worst secondary in football isn't going to change that for me, for the Bengals at least. But moving on, let's move on over to our week 3 takeaways. Park, what were some of your week 3 takeaways of the NFL?
I mean, the Minnesota Vikings are a wagon, bro. I think that's the biggest one for me right now. And this team looks unbeatable. And I think, on top of that, looking at the other conference, the Bills seem to be playing the most relaxed football they've played since Josh Allen's been there. And I think that's a huge thing when it comes to, again, I talk all the time about culture, playing comfortable, playing loose, and just making the game fun again. And I think the Bills have found a way to do that. And I think once you get these teams in the NFL that are able to play loose, have a little bit of fun, and just make winning easier, I think those are the teams you really have to worry about, because you're always chasing the wins, but when you're out there just to play ball with your boys and then the wins are still coming, I mean, you can get to a certain level of comfortable, and that will significantly increase your quality of play. I think those are my 2 biggest takeaways. And outside of that, I mean, this Steelers team's got to break at some point, right?
You think so, right?
There's no way this is sustainable. There's no way.
Yeah, no, completely. And I think that's what, my thought process was going to be for this, is I don't understand it. And I want to discuss real quick, just AFC North in general. The Browns, I think that they're dead in the water, right? You go look at what they did last week. They had the game in their hands, in the palm of their hands, and they just couldn't do it. So my question to you, Parker, is going to be, what's your thoughts on overall the AFC North? And just look at the Browns and the Ravens. Are you confident that both those teams can build back from what the season has been in the beginning?
The Browns have done a great job of riding their defense to victories. However, they're not able to do it, in the Steeler way of, hey, we're still able to generate points. Like, your offense still has to semi-function, even if it's limited or it's not as effective as you'd like it to be. You still got to get points on the board. And I think that's where the Browns are essentially they're gonna fall off at some point this year. They will, if they haven't already, because either this defense is going to get frustrated, or they're gonna face some tougher matchups, and their defenses are going to be able to hang on. And that's where the Browns are a team that worries me. I mean, often or ever at this point, just the Browns being the Browns, to call it what it is. But again, I think that's where the Steelers can really look like a much better team than they are, because they have that top quality defense, but they're able to still move the ball. They're still able to still be productive on the offensive side of the ball, and they can generate points from their defense. The Browns this year, I mean, you're getting great stops, you're getting 3 and outs. That's great and all, but you got to get points from somewhere. You can't win. You can't win games by not scoring. So, and then this Ravens team is interesting. I think this Ravens team is really interesting. I think they play games tight. They're competitive in a lot of their matchups, but and I think it's been the case with the Ravens for a while, but they have a hard time closing in close games. If they
is
get
that
on
Harbaugh
you early,
or Lamar? What do you think?
I don't know, and that's where it's been interesting to watch, because it feels like there's some games where it's almost like you're looking at the Marvin Lewis Bengals, where you're playing not to lose, right? Where you're just like, oh, we're up, let's try and grind this game out and run the ball, and then you let teams creep back on you, opposed to let's like the Buffalo Bills. Let's just keep the foot on the gas and let's just score 900 points a game, and that's how we're going to win. I think if the Ravens were willing to go out there and really stomp on teams, then it would be a much more productive system for them. But I feel like they're really comfortable getting up, even if it's just 1 score or 2 scores. They're willing to lean on the run game and ride it out, which it can work against worse teams, worse offenses. But I think once you face some of these more high-powered offenses, some of these more efficient offenses that are also willing to grind out that clock, and they get in these close games, they're not willing to take the risks to close it out. They're not willing to stretch that ball downfield. And I think, there is still concerns with how Lamar is as a passer in this league. So the Browns and the Ravens, I think, are really deciding their seasons early, and they're just going to be who they are. And they're almost okay with that at this point. That's where it's interesting to watch, because the Steelers, though they've seen a lot of success early on, like I said, I don't know how sustainable that is. I think that's great AFC North football. I don't think that's great football playing literally anybody else. However, they've proved me wrong 3 times already, so we'll see how it goes. And then the Bengals, obviously, we'll see what comes of them. We'll see if they can, not necessarily. I think there's a lot of fans clamoring to figure out the issues they have, but maybe it's not solving those with personnel, but more solving, the process of how you've gotten to where you've gotten, kind of like we talked about on Tuesday.
Yeah, some of my week 3 takeaways were Tua is better than we give him credit for.
Wow. That's music to my ears.
I'm to be honest, I think Tua is better than we give him credit for. The Dolphins' offense looked abysmal without him. And I think for years, a lot of people, no names, said that any quarterback could be in that system and produce because Mike McDaniels makes it easy. I think Tua is truly their franchise quarterback. And you got to hope that guy does what's best for him, whether that means he plays, whether it means he plays football again or whether he hangs it up and he says, you know what, I want to go do something different with my life. Regardless, I think we took Tua for granted.
Mm-hmm.
By we, I mean me. I think that I didn't think Tua was as good as he was. And so I just feel like, that team really does march to the beat of his drum. He could be a franchise quarterback and look a little different than, the rest of the league. And that's fine. He can be, throwing his quick screens and slants and all that kind of stuff like that. He still gets the job done. There isn't one cut way to be a franchise quarterback. So, for me, I just think that, Tua is a lot better than we give him credit for. Daniel, I know you probably want to touch on that a little bit because there's been a long, drawn out back and forth between us. Now, granted, he could return to the NFL in a few weeks after he comes off of IR and he could suck. And I could say, Daniel, I'm back to saying Tua is not that guy. That could 100% happen. But just from the early returns and what I've seen is like, damn, the Dolphins couldn't even put up a touchdown.
Yeah.
That was bad.
It's 50-50 with me, to be honest. I do think that Tua is, and I appreciate you, giving him the credit. I do think that when you take yourself out of the Dolphins situation, I do think that there's still concerns. Is he the guy to take him to a Super Bowl?
Oh, no, he's not that. He's not that.
Yeah.
He's not that. Like, let me be very clear.
Yeah.
Me saying he's better than I thought does not mean Super Bowl. Him and Super Bowl don't go in the same conversation. Can you get a playoff win maybe out of him? Maybe a playoff win or two out of him, sure. But I still think you could be a franchise quarterback even if you never have won a Super Bowl, right? We've seen people that the Chargers had Phillip Rivers as their long-term quarterback for years. I don't know. For me, I think if a guy's been with your team for over 5 years as the starter, I think we can put him as the quote-unquote franchise quarterback. And I feel like Tua can be that guy. Can be a 8 to 9 year, maybe even 10-year pro for the Miami Dolphins. That doesn't mean don't confuse me. Doesn't mean I think he'll ever come close to a Lombardi Trophy with them. I don't think Mike McDaniels is a winner.
Yeah, and that's kind of my next question. That's something I need to dive more deep into. Is I saw a lot of Dolphins fans calling for his head, saying Mike McDaniel needs to go, late game management, and that's something that consistently has been, his issue, right? He does kind of get cute late in the games. He does at the end of the second quarter, heading to the half. He does kind of get cute, whether it's going for a fourth down or whether it's punting away or using his analytics. And I saw a lot of Dolphins fans calling for his head. So I would just caution Dolphins fans to say, give it another week, and hopefully they start Tyler Huntley and not Skylar Thompson. And Thompson, I believe, is injured right now. But yeah, their offense looked abysmal. And I think that's the thing is with Tua, it looks like their offense is in a flow. And they don't have that flow without Tua. So I agree. I think their offense is a perfect match for Tua. It remains to be seen, though. Can he be the guy to take him over the top, though? So,
and since we're keeping it going on this discussion, Park, I don't know if you want to touch on that at all on the whole Tua. My thoughts on Tua being better than we give him credit.
Yeah, no, I read an interesting article. I got down a rabbit hole last night actually about kind of certain systems in the NFL and what they can do with certain personnel. And I think it's funny because they talked about Tua kind of being that kind of the line, right? Where it's like, if you can't get into this offense and make it look good, make it work, then you're not an NFL quarterback. And how Tua might just be the bare minimum NFL quarterback. He's not going to be this guy that's going to be a Super Bowl contending quarterback. He might be your franchise guy, but he's not going to get you over the hump because he's going to thrive in that system and he can make that system work really well. He can work really well within it. But you could move him anywhere else, he's probably going to struggle. It's almost like we talked about with Trevor Lawrence, whereas is it just the offense working well enough and they found a guy that's able to settle into it and run it very effectively, and he has the traits that can work really well within that system. But then if you move Tua to any other NFL team not running a Shanahan brand system, does he have success? So is he a successful quarterback? And I think the answer to that question is no. And that's where I think, maybe it's not Tua being better than we thought, but it's guys like Skylar Thompson just not being NFL quarterbacks.
So basically, you're saying he's a grocery guy.
He's, an accountant, insurance guy, the realtor. We'll see.
The next thing that
Rolls
I
Royce.
came up with, that the Giants can win. The Giants can win. The Giants can make this a good season for them, but I think they have to realize what they are. Daniel Jones is not going to automatically change who he is as a quarterback. They're not going to go out there and just be able to hang 40 points on a team's head and all that kind of stuff like that. But I think realizing who you are and playing within yourself is huge. And what I mean by that is I think every team has an identity, and I think the Giants' identity needs to be resting on the laurels of their defensive line. I think their defensive line can win them games. It'll be very similar to what, this gonna sound crazy to say, but remember when Eli Manning was their quarterback, man, and they were winning those Super Bowls and going to the playoffs, and they had that Justin Tuck, they had Michael Strahan,
Jason Pierre-Paul,
Prince Amuka. It was not Prince Amukamara, but O.C. Umenyiora.
Yes.
O.C. Umenyiora they had. Parker's looking like,
as
who
well.
But
O.C. Umenyiora is a Falcons great. Relax.
Okay.
Relax.
So
I'm there with you.
So they had all these pass rushers, and their calling card was really the defensive line. And their defensive line kept them in so many games, allowed them to win a lot of games that they had no business winning, even when I don't even feel like they necessarily had the strongest secondary, if you will. But I think playing within themselves and knowing who they are, relying on that defensive line is going to be huge for the Giants down the stretch. I like the defensive weapons that they have. And I believe in guys like Kayvon Thibodeau, okay? I believe in Brian Burns. I believe that this defensive line of the Giants can get home and keep them in games. Do that. Try to field a sufficient running game. Don't ask Daniel Jones to do too much. Ask him to pull the ball down at time to also utilize his ability to run, because he is an underrated runner. And then when you get in the red zone, take some shots, at Malik Neighbors, because Malik Neighbors is going to be a hell of a player in this league. That's what sort of was one of my takeaways this week. I think the Giants' identity is their defensive line. What say you, Parker?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I've never loved Kayvon Thibodeau, but I think this team's going to go how this defense goes. I think I do have concerns with what this team looks like, coming down the backstretch of the season when their offense really is just running through Malik Neighbors until it doesn't work. I think they're going to lose games because of that. But I think this could be a team that's able to sneak into the playoffs once this defense, is able to get into a groove and really click for them. I think this offensive line's been underrated as well. I think they've had really good showings. I haven't been very high on them in the past, but through the first 3 weeks of the season, I think they're showing a lot of progress with some of their younger guys. And I think this week's matchup, they got the Cowboys this week, I believe, and the Cowboys are making every offensive line they face look extremely good. They're making every offensive line they play look much better than they actually are. And so I think this is going to be another great game for the Giants to get out there, let the system run, and really take control of a game. I think they could take control of it early, to be honest with you.
Which is going to be an interesting conversation to have, because it makes you wonder, where the hell is Micah Parsons?
That's the question right now.
We're talking about giving this guy a huge contract. They were talking about this guy being the first defensive end to get like $200 million and get quarterback money and all this kind of stuff like that. Where you at? You're missing in action. Micah Parsons, you're doing all these podcasts with CJ Stroud and whatnot. And now look at yourself, right? Danny, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway from that is their defense coordinator, Shane Bowen. He's a guy that I remember watching because I did a deep dive after last year's Titans game with the Bengals, and then just seeing the Titans defense all last year and seeing, he was there, I believe, their DC there. And what he's done so far with the Giants makes me believe, and it just irritates me. They just need talent on offense, man. And that's just the part that pisses me off. Devin Singletary looks good. And Devin Singletary is a fine running back. He's an okay running back, but he's not elite. And the same thing, you got to get a franchise quarterback in there. I'm sorry. I believe that this team right now, if you go and there is no world in my mind this upcoming offseason, you are getting yourself a franchise quarterback, whether that's in the draft or whether that's trading for him. I'm sorry. I'm out of the Daniel Jones business. And I think that this team has too much potential. I think Brian Dable's a good coach. We saw that, that playoff run. I don't think that was a fluke 2 years ago. I don't think so.
And they won. They beat the Vikings, right?
They beat the Vikings. And like I said, I don't think that was a fluke. I think he's a good coach. I like what their defense has got going on. And something that, really perked my ears up was after the Commanders game, and this is why I brought up the defense coordinator, he took a lot of accountability. They didn't spy Jaden Daniels. They didn't blitz Jaden Daniels enough. And he went out and he said, listen, this is what needs to happen. And that was on me. What did they do the next week? They blitzed the hell out of Deshaun Watson, and they look good doing it. So huge props to the Giants defense. They just need some more talent on offense because Malik Neighbors is going to be a top 5. He is a superstar. You just have to capitalize on his youth. And I think you got a 3 to 4 year window to do this now. So get yourself a franchise quarterback. And I think we'll be talking about the Giants in a different light in the next couple of years.
Man, they could use a guy like Saquon Barkley, couldn't they?
Yeah. It's almost like they should have drafted him.
They should go find that guy.
Let's keep the conversation rolling. There was one last takeaway that I had for week 3 of the NFL, Parker. Sure. To me, there is no clear-cut best team in the NFL right now. Everyone looks beatable. Everyone looks normal. No one looks abnormal. No one looks like they are just a juggernaut. And that's just the way I see it. I think I see chinks and armors of a lot of teams out there. And I know that's going to ruffle some feathers, Chiefs fans. But the fact of the matter is, it is what it is. I just don't think that there is a team out there that's clear-cut the best team in the NFL right now. And I think that I don't know who is going to be in NOLA. Again, it's just still early. It's only 3 weeks into the NFL, but through 3 weeks, I'm not sold on any team yet right now. It'll be interesting to see what teams round into form because you always have those early in the season darlings that look like world beaters that look great and then they just fall off a cliff. And it's crazy to say because we have teams that are undefeated, we have teams that are 3-0, but it's like feels a little bit like it's fool's gold a little bit, and reality is going to hit some team at some point. What are you guys' thoughts on that, Daniel?
Yeah, I think that's this season. And I think that is kind of a trend at some point in certain seasons. You go look at, I think, the past couple of years, and there is no juggernaut. The 49ers are a perfect example. The team is 1-2, but I'm confident once they get healthy, they'll be back in the playoff race. They'll be back in, that top 5 contention. But this is kind of what we expected into the season, not necessarily to this degree, but we expected the AFC to be between the Chiefs, Texans, Bengals, Bills, potentially our favorite team on the show, the Jets. And when you looked at the NFC, it really was the 49ers, and then the Lions were there. The Packers were up and coming. I think that's the NFL today. I think there is a lot of parity, and the storyline is really going to be, is there a team that can stop the three-peat of the Chiefs? And I think that there's many teams, just will they do it? And that's the question, because the Chiefs are a team where they'll always look like this, and then come playoff time, they'll scrape some wins out. So I believe if it's not the Chiefs, it'll be some different. It'll be something weird. And
so I was about to say, the Chiefs are just finding a way to win, and that's what great teams do. They just find a way to win, and it doesn't matter how it looks, doesn't matter how pretty it is. You just find a way to win, and I think that's where it is for me with the Bills. Right, I'm still picking the Chiefs to beat the Bills.
Yes,
right. If those two teams match up, because we see that we see that the Bills are a team that looks like they're on fire right now, but they usually look this good in the regular season. Sean Brennan, I see you in the comment section. No worries, brother. I'm paying attention to you. And so through 3 weeks, you're saying, and now the AFC is just the Chiefs. That is crazy work, my friend. You're usually a very level-headed thinker here, brother, but that's not too level-headed if you ask me. 3 weeks calling it the AFC is just the Chiefs. Let's screenshot that, please. Do me a favor. Can we screenshot that?
Done.
Jimmy, do me a favor. Let's screenshot that real quick because I can't wait for that to bite you in the ass on later in the season, Sean. So I'll give you the smoke you're looking for. Yeah, man, I think that the Bills are doing what they usually do. They look great in the regular season. I just can't trust them in the playoffs. I can't trust them to put it all together. And that's not any that's not me talking down to Joe Brady, who I think has been a great offensive coordinator for them. That's just me saying the proof has been in the pudding and what we've seen so far. So I don't know if you guys have anything else that you want to add on that, but here's what I'll say. It's going to be interesting. If you guys could do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content. Listen, last NFL takeaway topic I want to get to before we get to our fantasy football segment, Park, is will the Bengals bounce back? Will the Bengals bounce back this week against the Carolina Panthers and their old best friend, the Red Rifle, Andy Dalton? Parker, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Andy Dalton's here to get to 500 against the Bengals, right? He's 2-1 right now. He's here to get that second win. or not get to 500. We're hoping he gets to 500. But I think, Andy Dalton and this Panthers team has looked like a different team than they were with Bryce Young at the helm. And I think, a lot of people have talked about it, but Bryce Young just wasn't ready to start. I don't think he was ever the best quarterback in that room. And I think, Andy Dalton didn't expect to ever be a starter again. I think he came out and said that. So I really do think that this is the year for Andy Dalton to prove himself, and maybe he's not trying to go get some big blockbuster contract at this point in his career, but he's out here to prove that he can win games. And I think it's interesting that the Panthers decided to go this way. So I think, honestly, for them, a worst case scenario would be becoming an 8-9 win team or even a 7-win team. I think this Bengals team, it really feels like all of the wounds that they've suffered through the first 3 weeks have been self-inflicted. It doesn't really feel like they're getting outplayed per se. It just feels like they're getting in their own way. I think there's a lot of situations where you can get into the all 22. You can watch the film and you can be like, oh, I don't understand why they're putting themselves in these situations. I don't understand why, the Bengals aren't able to, succeed. They're just they're getting in their own way. It's kind of like we talk about the Chiefs, right? The Chiefs are finding ways to win, even though they're not playing great football. The Bengals are finding ways to lose all of these games that they're matching up with, whether it's the Chiefs game where they took it down to the wire, whether it's this Commanders game where they had a chance to win it there at the end of the game. They couldn't find a way to get a stop. And so I know the Bengals have a lot of health issues, and I know coming in, I think to week 5 is when they're really going to see a fully healthy team outside of Trent Brown, who's done for the year. But I think Amarius Mims is going to be able to settle in and look. This offensive line is going to look really impressive coming down the stretch. And I think if they can figure out what's going on with this front seven, and especially with the back end of this defense, which just seems to be all over the place right now, they're gonna catch that stride. And we've seen the Bengals rattle off 10 straight wins on their way to a playoff run, and we've seen the Bengals. They're not a September team. Super Bowls aren't won in September, and kind of like you mentioned, there's some teams that are 3-0 right now that I wouldn't be surprised if we see the wheels fall off come November. But good for them right now. Let them ride that high. I'm not worried about losing games.
Say those teams, Parker. Don't just say don't just go out there and say some teams. Say those teams by name.
Hey man, the Steelers always find a way to lose 8 games in the back half of the year. The Bills have been playing. Josh Allen's been playing surprisingly clean football and turnover-free football through 3 weeks, and I think we're going to see some regression. And if we don't, maybe he's actually the elite quarterback people have been saying he's been through his whole career. I don't think he is. I think we're going to get back to reckless Josh Allen once they get into some closer games. They've just been dominating teams right now, which I know it's hard to imagine them not doing that when they've shown it. But I've seen this Bills team, and this isn't a better roster than they've had in the past. So, I mean, those are just 2 teams in the AFC. And then again, this Chiefs team, they always find ways to win, but you can only live in close games for so long. And I know it's, Chiefs fans always want to take that as a shot. Like, oh, well, we're still winning. You're still winning games. The NFL comes down to grit. It comes down to luck, and it comes down to health. And those are the things that I've always said. Luck and health will take you farther in this league than being a good team. And I think the Chiefs, if they're able to stay healthy, are going to be a great team. But I'd be surprised if they don't have some of these injury issues plague them through the rest of the year. Having Carson Steele as your starting running back next to Samaje Perine is not a great situation. Your left tackle and right tackle situation aren't ideal on offense. And Travis Kelce's kind of been a ghost right now. So, I mean, we'll see what this team looks like. I mean, I'm just saying I had the anytime touchdown week 1 and he let me down, and I hate the Chiefs now. So, but that's what I'm saying, though. The Bengals are a team that always catches fire in December. They always heat up in November, and they win games in January. I'm concerned with winning games in January and hopefully February, not September. So,
Man, I like that. Listen, I think the Bengals can bounce back this week, and I think they will bounce back this week against the Carolina Panthers. But again, this isn't going to be no walk in the park, there's no quote unquote easy game left on your schedule. So, at the end of the day, I think that this team still hasn't played its best football yet. And I could see them rounding the form, but you just hate to see that losses to the Carolina Panthers and the Patriots on your schedule. This is no matter how the season plays out, looking back and seeing, seeing those losses on your schedule will kind of hurt you a little bit. You're like, damn, those are the ones you feel like you get away a little bit, and they had no business getting away. Gary Jellison asked, Parker, can the Bengals get some play action going this Sunday? The run game looks good.
I mean, they've run a ton of play action. I mean, from what I've seen, they've been run heavy. They've been play action heavy. It's something I talked about in my breakdown of the week 2 game. Week 1, I think we saw the Zach Taylor special as far as offense is concerned. But I think we're really starting to see Dan Pitcher's hand in this offense being the run heavy game, being the run heavy offense that they've been, and that's leaning into that play action stuff. You're able to use your tight ends a lot more. I think Eric All is going to get starter level of volume. Coming to the end as we get to the end of the year. I think Mike Gesicki is going to turn into, a third down tight end, probably maybe in 12 personnel with all, where he's still split out. And kind of like Malik's talked about, he's got to get targets in the red zone. Like he's got to be one of those bodies that you're utilizing in the red zone. I wouldn't be surprised if he's got a weird number of touchdowns compared to his yards and targets at the end of the year. But I think the play action games looked really good. They block it up great. I think teams have to finally respect the run of the Bengals, which is why they're getting some of these explosive plays via the tight end. So I hope they stick with it. But I think so far it's looked great. And so I hope they write it out.
Yep. It's going to be interesting though. Parker, we want to thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Sit Down with Malik Wright Morning Show. You'll be back joining us on the show. Maybe this will be the week where we finally get you on for the recap show, brother. How about that? How about we actually pencil that in?
I always stay available. It was funny Monday night. I was laughing to myself watching the show because I know it's much later for you guys out there than me. So I was watching it get late, and I'm like, hey, I think Malik just has to get on a soapbox tonight. That's all right. It's fun to watch anyway. I'm always there, always watching. I'm always happy to be on if you'll have me on. But hey, at the worst, I'll see you Tuesday morning, brother.
We'll plan for Tuesday morning, but you know what? In my head, I'm gonna actually plan. I'm gonna make a note in the calendar. Jimmy, Daniel, remind me. Let's get Parker on the recap show this week where Bengals fans can let out their frustrations or hopefully their excitement. Hopefully we'll see what takes place. But Parker, my man, enjoy your weekend. I'll see you on Sunday. And who dey?
Always a pleasure, brother. Who dey?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let's keep the conversation rolling. Fantasy football is king here over at TWSN. And we want to get you guys all squared away with the fantasy football outlook for tonight's Thursday night football matchup between Giants and Cowboys. And it wouldn't be a fantasy football Thursday here at TWSN if we didn't have our good friend Michael Hara join the show. Mike, what's going on, man?
How we doing today, Malik?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Feeling great on this Thursday. Before we jump into the fantasy football talk, do us a favor, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content from TWSN Studios. Mike, interesting matchup going on tonight. You got Giants taking on the Dallas Cowboys. Is there any matchups that you're paying attention to for tonight's game? Or yes, James is right. One half of the law firm of O'Hara and Bradshaw. The fantasy football law firm. We said we really got to make that, Daniel, a tag for Friday. We have to. But is there any outlooks that you're looking for tonight? Also, everyone, drop your questions down in the comment section. We'll try to get Mike to answer a couple of those before he heads off. But Mike, any matchups that you're paying attention to tonight?
Yeah, first I want to just take a second to marvel at what Malik Neighbors has done over these last few weeks. I came on this show about a month ago and said he could legitimately break the record for rookie targets by a rookie, and he is very much on pace to do so. In these last 2 weeks, he ranks first in targets, first in target share, first in air yards, first in air yard share, and first in fantasy points per route run. So he is just absolutely dominating the NFL right now. He is a set it and forget it wide receiver. He's been going back and forth with Trayvon Diggs recently on social media, and this is going to be a matchup to watch. You have to have him in your lineup, and I'm just super excited about that one. But in terms of a guy who may be a little bit more on the fringe that I'm excited about his matchup, it is Devin Singletary. And I do think he is pretty firmly into the RB2 category this season for a season-long perspective, but some people still might have some hesitancy to start him, but I absolutely think you should. Daniel brought it up earlier. He's looked great this season. He truly is owning this backfield right now. 74% of the snaps. He's taken 79% of the backfield carries, and he's seeing a healthy 10% target share. So based on like his role alone within the offense, that's a strong RB2 option. And then, yeah, like Daniel said, he's looked good. 5th in missed tackles forced per attempt and 2nd in yards after contact per attempt. So he's being effective with his looks on top of getting the vast majority of the opportunities in this backfield. And then this matchup against the Dallas defense, it's incredible. This Dallas rushing defense has just been torched. And I know as Bengals fans, we can say that the Bengals defense has looked bad, rush defense has looked bad, but Dallas is about as bad as it gets. They're dead last in rush yards allowed per game, and they're dead last in EPA allowed per rush by a pretty wide margin. So I do think that this is going to be a strong Devin Singletary game, and I do think you can be comfortable starting him as your RB2.
Man, Mike with the stats. I'm curious where you can get those stats. I'm like EPA, all these other stats. Mike, there's something I'm curious about, and a lot of Cowboys fans, even fantasy football fans, are asking. What the hell is this backfield for the Cowboys? Is it Dowdle? Is it Zeke? Are you staying away? What's your thoughts on the Cowboys backfield? Are these guys even worth touching tonight?
Yeah, this is an untouchable backfield right now. Early in the year, they were simply rotating drives between Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott. And now they've moved towards Dowdle being the starter. Last week, he got the first 2 drives, I believe, before another back saw the field. But it's turning into a 3-man rotation. Not a full-blown rotation, but they've got actually 4. They've got 4 backs mixing in here. They've got Dowdle is the primary, but it's like a much less, it's not a true RB1 role. They've got Zeke grabbing some touches here and there. Deuce Vaughn is getting carries. And then they've got like this fullback Hunter Lepke, I think is how you pronounce his name, but he's getting targets and carries. It's a total disaster. It's one of the worst rushing attacks in the league. And there's 4 guys siphoning off touches from whoever could be the RB1. So for the time being, unless someone runs away with this backfield or it improves to where it can sustain multiple backs, which I just don't think it will, this is somewhere where you can't be starting any of these guys.
Completely. And I think that's the right move, because these guys I was looking, they're going to get 8 to 10, maybe 8 to 10 touches a game. But I want to keep it going real quick. Let's get to some of these questions, and then we'll get to a couple of your biggest predictions for this upcoming week. Our guy, Sean Brennan, residential Chiefs fan, he said, asking about the Buccaneers backfield. I believe we've talked about this before. Rachaad White, is he ever going to get going, or is he a scratch for the rest of the season? And also, is Bucky Irving, is he legit?
The question about Rachaad White, he was never going. He has been one of the least efficient and worst rushers in the NFL since he took over as the starter last year. His fantasy value last year was propped up by dominating the workload and being a strong receiver, and I still think he will do that, but it's hard to feel confident getting him into your lineup. Last week, he did once again dominate the snap share, but Todd Bowles came out and said that was just a factor of the game script. They were playing from behind against the Broncos. It seemed like right out of the gates, they were down 17 points, and they were just playing catch up for the entirety of the game. So I think that was what drove his significant snap share last week. But I don't think you can really start either of these guys. I do think at the end of the day, Bucky Irving is going to eat into the rushing work. But I just think it's going to be an ugly split to the point where you're not going to feel really comfortable starting either of them. I don't think Bucky Irving is the type of running back. He's less than 200 pounds. He's just not. And for now, Todd Bowles seems to prefer Rachaad White in pass protection and on passing downs. So I don't think that he's going to be the type of guy that's going to be able to steal enough work away from White to have a solid standalone role. But I do think he should be rostered, because if something does happen to White, Irving's flashed the talent and the efficiency of a guy that you could start in your lineups. But for the time being, White's just too inefficient, and I don't think Irving will have a big enough a role to be really starting either of these guys.
A couple rapid fire ones. Gary Jellison said, Michael Hara, is it a Rico Dowdle breakout game tonight?
I just unfortunately don't think so. It's just with the way this isn't something that you can jump on before you see it. Like, just because of how they've been rotating their running backs, like I said, they had 4 guys into the fray last week. I just don't think that this is something that you can predict until we see it actually happening. If Dowdle at some point this season starts running away with the snaps and the touches, I think you could consider starting him. But with this many guys in the rotation and just the overall quality of this rushing attack, I wouldn't be putting any of my money or getting him into any of my lineups.
Completely. We got a couple questions about J.K. Dobbins. Sean said, I'm benching Dobbins on my team this week because both of his tackles are out. And Kevin Jones has a question. Should I start J.K. Dobbins or Tyrone Tracy Jr.?
Yeah, that one, I think it's pretty clearly J.K. Dobbins, if that's your choice. Like I said, Devin Singletary is just owning the work in this backfield. There's just not enough touches to go around for Tracy to be fantasy relevant. But I'm personally the losing Joe Alt's week to week. I haven't seen an update on Rashawn Slater, but losing Joe Alt at a minimum for a couple of weeks is painful for J.K. Dobbins. He's been an absolute mauler through these last through his first 3 NFL games. But I'm very interested, and I'm looking to buy J.K. Dobbins if someone is just box score watching. He got shut down by a pretty tough Steelers defense last week, but this is a backfield that's really swinging in J.K. Dobbins' favor. Early in the season, we saw this as pretty much a 50-50 split between Dobbins and Gus Edwards, but thank God Jim Harbaugh and the coaching staff realized that Gus Edwards is a complete dustball and he doesn't belong on an NFL field anymore. And J.K. Dobbins saw 65% of the snaps and almost 85% of the running back opportunities last week. So it's looking like a one-man show. And I think Gus Edwards is basically droppable at this point in just about every single league out there. And if someone is just caught up seeing that he went for, I think it was 55 yards on the ground last week and thinks he's regressing, I think he's a strong RB2 candidate given his role. And I would be looking to trade for him if someone's getting a little bit nervous.
My God, did you just say a dust ball?
He is.
Dust ball's crazy.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
He
He was talking. Remember, who was he talking about earlier? Tyler Lockett.
He's also a dust ball.
No, he said, what'd you say? You called him, oh my God.
Michael Hara with the nickname.
I forgot what he called Lockett.
Dust ball is crazy.
He said old, washed up. No, he said.
I don't know. He said something, but we got to go
some
back.
variation of being washed 100%, and Gus Edwards in the same way.
That's
my
hilarious. Real quick, James O'Hara, the law firm. Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, who gets more fantasy points in the matchup this week?
Josh Allen. I will never have Josh. Maybe on a week-to-week basis, I'll have Lamar ahead, but Josh Allen is the QB1. He will always be the QB1. He has been a top 10. His last 4 seasons have been a top 10 quarterback season of all time. So over the last 4 seasons, he accounts for 40% of the top 10 fantasy quarterback seasons of all time. Until something changes, he will be the perennial QB1. People wondered if he could get it done without the weapons. Absolutely, he can do it. He's done it on the ground in week 1. He did it through the air in week 3. This guy is the bona fide QB1 for fantasy football.
All right.
Well, listen, Mike, we want to thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Sitdown Malik Wright Morning Show. You know you'll be back here tomorrow with the law firm O'Hara and Bradshaw as we take them through the entire slate of games for week 4. Hope you're doing well in your fantasy football league, Mike, this past week. Hopefully you did some.
Yeah, how you doing?
My boy right there on the right side of the screen, Rashee Rice, and my other boy, Malik Neighbors, are carrying me to many, many points in my fantasy leagues and currently holding down the fort in the TWSN Writers League. So things are looking up. You
love to hear that. And, it's a shame that you and me aren't going head to head in football. I'm sure that would make for an interesting matchup. But I'm glad to see that, Malik's are doing great for you in life, but listen, Mike, appreciate you joining the show. We'll see you tomorrow with Steve as we break through and we come through week 4 of the NFL season, my man. I hope that you enjoy the games tonight.
Yep. Have a good one, guys. I'll catch up with you tomorrow.
Yes, sir, my man. That's Michael Hara. Make sure you guys give him a follow and make sure you follow all his great work that he does here at TWSN as well as other outlets, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content. Want to move the conversation on over to the UFC really quickly. We've got a UFC slate on tap this week, but before we jump into that, Nick Diaz is returning. Nick Diaz is returning to the octagon, and to be honest with you, this doesn't move me at all. I don't know why he's returning. He's going against Vicente Luque. This is a guy last time we saw him out there was against Robbie Lawler. And I said Waller. I was about to say
That sounds
Robbie Lawler.
crazy.
And he quit basically. He couldn't deal with the grind. He couldn't deal with the pace, the pressure that he was dealing with in that fight. Now he's going up against a killer in Vicente Luque, who seems to be finding his rhythm now. What are your thoughts on the return of Nick Diaz? I don't really care to see it, but it's a fight that the UFC is excited to make. This is a guy that's, if he's not 40 already, he's pushing 40. And I just don't know what the ultimate goal is. I feel like his legacy is what it is. At this point, Nick Diaz is bad boy from Stockton, California, made the Stockton slap famous along with his brother Nate. And I just don't want to see that guy take any more damage anymore in his career. What are your thoughts, though, Daniel?
The last time we saw him fight Malik, and I remember this vividly, we did a pre-show for the Abu Dhabi card. I forgot who else was on the show. I remember I was like on vacation somewhere. I think I was in like Colorado, and I just remember us discussing this fight at length, saying, well, this is a bad matchup for him, and this is, a legends fight. This is it. And he went in that fight, and respectfully, he got embarrassed. He quit. Laid on the floor. He knew he was done. And we're not talking a year later, Malik. We're not talking 2 years later. This is 3 years on the dot later. His last fight was September 2021. So 3 years later, after quitting the octagon, after losing to a legend who Robbie Lawler himself wasn't a superstar, himself, he wasn't at his best. And now you're fighting a heavier hands guy in Vicente Luque. This would be the shock of the year, in my opinion, if Nick Diaz were to win this fight. And I just feel for him. And I hope that there's a reason, and I hope that he sees something in Vicente Luque that he believes he can beat. And I hope this isn't just him wanting one last shot. And that's pretty much all I have for this fight, Malik. I have hope, and it ain't a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I hope. I mean, maybe it is him wanting one last shot, and that's fine to have that motivation. But just to go out there and either for a money grab, which I don't think Nick is doing. I think Nick actually just wants fights that he thinks he could win. They're delusional enough to say that they think they could beat Leon Edwards. They think they could beat some of the top guys in the division. And
he's 41. He's 41.
He's 41. And I think they see themselves in a different light. And maybe Nick Diaz defies the odds. Maybe Nick Diaz goes out there and beats Vicente Luque. Who knows? I'm just not buying that will happen. Those are my thoughts on that. So we'll see what takes place.
Luque is 32 also.
Yeah,
He's
Luque
9
is
years younger.
He's 9 years younger, and he's got power. And I struggle to see where Nick Diaz will have the advantage in this fight as well, though. I think that's the tough part for me. So we'll see what happens with Nick Diaz. We'll see. Let's move on over to right bet. Let's move on over to the right bet. I know we have our UFC in there as well as our Thursday Night Football bets. Let's get some your favorite Thursday Night Football bets before we head over to UFC bets, Daniel.
Yeah, I'll make this one kind of quick. I'm going with the studs for this game. Give me CeeDee Lamb over receiving yards.
Okay.
You go look at the Giants and what they have on their secondary. They got a couple guys who are injured. I believe 2 of their starting cornerbacks are out for this game. And when you just look at this matchup, this is a team in the Cowboys that has looked lethargic. Their offense has looked pedestrian. I don't trust their rushing offense. And I do think that could be a big Zeke Elliott game. I think that he could get a touchdown. I think they could, if anything, if they get up big, it could be Zeke gets 10 carries for 55 yards and gets 1 to 2 touchdowns. But the majority of this offense is running through CeeDee Lamb. It is being him getting targeted 10 times a game. So give me his over receiving yards. Give me a sprinkle at 100+ receiving yards. And on the flip side of things, like a guy Michael Hara was talking about, you got to give me Devin Singletary. And I'm strictly taking his over scrimmage yards. The reason why I like that is I think he is, Brian Dable's running back of choice. I think he is going to get 15 to 20 touches. And he has been pretty good so far this year in the screen game. So I know they got Tracy. I know they got a couple other backs there. But Devin Singletary over scrimmage yards covers my ass if they go down big. And it also covers my ass if they are in this game. So all around, I think Devin Singletary is the guy for the Giants that I am looking to attack. I'm not concerned about him being benched. I'm not concerned about him, in the game script. So all around, give me his over scrimmage yards. And if there's anything else I like in this game, to be honest, I do like CeeDee Lamb a lot. Like I said, I think I'm going to go to the Zeke route. I am going to take Zeke his over in carries. So that's something where it is a kind of a weird read I've got for this game. But like I said, you go look at the 2 games that they were up in, early on in the game, and Zeke was getting a lot of the touches. He was getting 8 to 10 carries a game. And I think he's going to be their goal line back. So Zeke Elliott, I'm looking at him a little sprinkle on the touchdown because I'm not concerned if they're in the 10 to 5 yard range. If they're in the red zone, I think he's going to be their go-to guy. And there's really nobody else on this team that I can trust. I don't trust Jalen Tolbert. I don't trust Brandon Cooks. This offense is, in my eyes, it's very easy to read. It's going to be CeeDee Lamb, 10 to 12 targets today. And I think it's a CeeDee masterclass. And I really don't see, I hope somebody can talk me out of this. I was trying to find people on Twitter. I was trying to find people elsewhere to talk me out of this. I really struggle to see how it's not a CeeDee masterclass. The Giants have struggled against wide receiver ones. The Giants, I don't see them, double teaming CeeDee Lamb all game. And if they do, we've seen him, come out of that before. We've seen Dak Prescott loves targeting him, even in double coverage. So CeeDee Lamb, it is a masterclass. I don't see a world where it's not. Give me his over receiving yards. If you even want, I think his over receptions is 6.5. I do like his over receiving yards better. But like I said, this game's pretty simple to read. I think it will be a one-score game. It is a divisional matchup. Cowboys and Giants, Cowboys normally wallop on them, but divisional matchup. Giants looked good last week. I think we see a one-score game, and all around, I think the Cowboys will win this game. But CeeDee Lamb, Devin Singletary, Ezekiel Elliott, and I'm trying to see. I do like Daniel Jones to throw an interception. I believe his line was at -140, and that's something where I can trust that. I go look at his last 2 matchups against Cowboys. I believe he threw an interception in both of those games, and I really struggle to see if the Cowboys go up big, or even if the Cowboys are up, and if the Giants aren't leading by 1 to 2 touchdowns, Daniel's going to have to throw the ball. And he's got Malik Neighbors, yes, but we've seen him trust Malik Neighbors a little too much. So Daniel Jones interception is also something I would totally be looking at.
So moving over to the UFC, and Daniel, I appreciate you giving everyone the what they need, so to speak, to have a profitable Thursday night football and some of your favorite bets. And my bets will be on the Patreon, which you can put up top on my right-hand side, Daniel, so people can scan the code if they're looking to make some money and get some of our favorite plays for tonight's games, as well as my favorite picks for UFC. If you want access to that, all you have to do is subscribe to the TWSN Patreon above. But listen, this is a nice UFC card taking place this weekend. Listen, I don't give my official picks until after weigh-ins, obviously, and that's usually on the Patreon. But I will tell you right now, there are some fights that I'm looking at, some fights that I'm pretty excited about. Brian Battle is taking on Kevin Jousset this week. Listen, Kevin Jousset is a kickboxer through and through, a guy with good stand-up, but Brian Battle's finisher through and through. Brian Battle can finish you on the feet, but he has slick submission skills as well. I think Brian Battle is going to win this fight. And Daniel, one of my favorite bets that I'm already leaning on before weigh-ins, Brian Battle is usually a pro about it, but Brian Battle to win by KO, TKO, or submission double chance on FanDuel is sitting at plus 260. I like his chance in this fight. He's already the favorite at -180. Brian Battle is a finisher through and through, and he's a guy that's going to look to bring the best out of his opponents. I like another matchup that we've got. William Gomes is a guy who's been really, really good in the UFC. He's taking on Joe Anderson Brito. You want to talk about a guy that finishes all of his opponents for the most part? Joe Anderson Brito is that guy. William Gomes has very good takedown defense, but Joe Anderson Brito has slick submission skills. Joe Anderson Brito also hits like an absolute Mack truck. If William Gomes is going to win this fight, he's literally going to push Joe Anderson Brito to the 3rd round, extend him, get him tired, get him gassed, and keep this fight standing. And that's kind of crazy to even say, right? To keep the fight standing against a guy like Joe Anderson Brito. But I really feel like that is going to be the key to victory for William Gomes, because if this fight goes to the ground, Joe Anderson Brito is going to control him and potentially even look for a ground and pound or submission. So that's a fight that I'm looking at. Matt Frivola, the steamroller, is taking on Farazi Ziam this weekend. And Farazi Ziam is the favorite, fool's gold. Matt Frivola is going to beat Farazi Ziam. I like Farazi Ziam. He has great kicks. He seemed like he's finally coming into his grown man era. But guess what? The steamroller Frivola is going to be on one. Marab Davashvili, right? His teammate training with Ray Longo over in Staten Island just became the bantamweight champion. You know who he trained with throughout for this training camp? Matt Frivola. Aljamain Sterling, although he's coming off his back injury, he had a fight coming up against Movsar Evloev. Guess what? You know who he was training with? The steamroller, Matt Frivola. So Matt Frivola sitting at underdog money against a guy in Farazi Ziam is fool's gold because of who Farazi Ziam has barely escaped by and won against lately. You want to make yourself some money? Take the steamroller Frivola to beat Farazi Ziam this weekend. Taylor Lopoulos is taking on Vince Morales. You want to talk about fights? These are fights that I like. Listen, Taylor Lopoulos' money line is a little too rich for me, sitting at -390. I expect to get up to 450. But if you can potentially get him at to win this fight via points, I would definitely take that bet because Taylor is more of a point fighter. He has the ability to knock you out, but he's a kickboxer through and through. He always has the ability to finish a guy like Vince Morales, who I think is weak in the midsection, and he can finish him via one of these body strikes. But I really, really like Taylor Lapilus in this fight. So take him, if you can, via points. And last but not least, Benoit St. Denis is taking on Renato Moicano this week. Money Moicano. This is going to be a good fight. This is going to be one of those fights where as long as Benoit St. Denis' gas tank holds up, he should win, but it's a 5-round fight. It's the first 5-round fight in Benoit St. Denis' UFC career. This is crazy, but I'm leaning that Benoit St. Denis might gas out. I think Benoit St. Denis might gas out. If he doesn't get Renato Moicano out there earlier, Renato grows as the fight goes on. He grows and gets stronger and gets tougher as the fight goes on. And I believe that you'll be able to live bet Renato Money Moicano and get him at plus money after Benoit St. Denis comes out very, very strong and puts pressure on him and makes life difficult for him. So if you want to hedge a little bit, take Benoit St. Denis to win within the first 2 rounds, right? Via knockout or submission. I don't think he submits Renato Moicano. Renato Moicano is absolutely disgusting with his jiu-jitsu, right? But I think that if he's going to win this fight, he's going to win this fight early. But if it gets in the 3rd round, give me Renato Money Moicano to beat Benoit St. Denis. And I know this sucks to say because Benoit St. Denis will be riding on a losing streak. Danny, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is actually one of my favorite cards of the year. Surprisingly, you go look at some of these names, right? You go look at Joe Anderson Brito. I love it, taking his money line. Moicano and St. Denis is definitely a weird one. The value is on Moicano for sure. It's definitely on Moicano, and I like it. Plus 215. I might stay away from that one personally, but I definitely going back. Brian Battle is another one, minus 180. That line is far too low, and I think that's a little recency bias after his last fight didn't get finished. His last fight was a no contest because of an eye poke. And you go look at some of these other fights, Malik, even the co-main event, Brendan Allen versus Nastyanina Imavov. I think that goes one of 2 ways, in my opinion. I think Imavov starches him and KOs or TKOs Brendan Allen. That's the only 2 ways that Brendan Allen's lost, is by KO or TKO, or it's a decision win for Brendan Allen. He wrestles him. Top control. Both of these guys have looked very good, but I will say I looked at, Imavov's last fight against Jared Cannonier, and that was a 50-50 fight. Jared Cannonier was putting some hands on Nastyanina Imavov, and some people even said that was an early stoppage. So if there's anything I like, I do think that there is definitely some value on a Brendan Allen by decision. To be honest, I think that's plus 400, plus 350, plus 400. Brendan Allen by decision is one of my sneaky plays. And overall, I think Imavov should take care of business. He is a much better fighter standing up. But at the end of the day, I think Brendan Allen's got some grit. So I'd be taking one of 2 ways, either Imavov early, round 1, round 2 KO, or Brendan Allen to go the distance and win.
Absolutely. And listen, we are in the business of making y'all some money. So make sure you guys subscribe to the TWSN Patreon and give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or when we upload content. Know Thy Enemy will be going live Friday at 7 p.m. where Evan McPhillips breaks down the keys to victory for the Cincinnati Bengals. I'll be live tomorrow at 10 a.m. for Fantasy Football Fridays with O'Hara and Bradshaw, the fantasy football law firm, as we take you all through week 4 of the NFL and hope to make you guys some money. I'll also be giving some of my UFC picks on tomorrow's show. So make sure you guys tune in at 10 a.m. Looking forward to seeing you there. And remember, there's only one way you should be waking up early: watching sports, talking sports, having the dialogue, whether we agree, whether we disagree. And that is truly the right way. We appreciate y'all. Hope you guys enjoyed Thursday Night Football.